I don't even know where to begin with this book. Oh, I hate this book. This book is like 500 pages, and decided to record a video because I got up to the part where the guy's telling me about the 22 steps of story structure. Okay? After he had just explained how the 3-act structure makes a story stiff and predictable and disconnected, disjointed, right? And his solution is to make the problem worse by subdividing the 3-act structure into 22 distinct steps, which have these really,
for example,
really ridiculous names. The names aren't that important, but you have 22 steps, and they're named like Ghost and Story World, Ally or Allies, Fake Ally Opponent, Plan, Drive, Attack by Ally, Gate, Gauntlet, Visit to Death, New Equilibrium. But it gets better because on top of that, he also has an alternative, an additional seven-step story structure that goes over it, that goes, more in the beginning and at the end of the story. So you got 7 steps that are called weakness, need, desire, opponent, plan, and battle, self-revelation, and new equilibrium. Those mostly work in the beginning and at the end, okay, but they kind of have trouble with the middle part, because the plan section is like really big, right? So that's why he decides to make this second, subdivision, right, where you have even more steps. And it's just it's like point of view. You just want to write a story, right? You know what I'm saying? And his book is so long and so complicated. And it's like there's the 22 steps, and then there's the 7 steps that go over that. And then it's like you have to connect the steps to the designing principle, and the designing principle is connected to the symbolism, and the symbolism, the symbols create a symbol line. You see what I'm saying? A symbol line, and then the symbol line connects to the characters, and the characters have to connect to the other characters, and it's just like there's just all of this stuff that's just, it's abstract, and it's like it's just really jumbled and disjointed, and it's like, how is anyone going to learn anything from this? Okay, like, how is anyone going to take this and write a story? And as I've already said before, I mean, just subdividing and making more steps, you're just making the story more mechanical and more predictable, and which is funny because the whole purpose of it is to do the exact opposite. He just got explaining what were organic story structures, and he went over 5 or 6, 7 story structures that, created like an organic effect. Who knows what that is? Who knows what he means by an organic story structure, right? At least in this book, he actually tried to define, the words like, story and plot and all that. But it's just so typical of creative writing books, which are that have a number of problems. Okay, first off, they're way too long. Like way too long. Okay, these simple principles that you pick up, that you learn as you read a story, as you read one of these books, whether that be this or Stephen King's or the collection of Ernest Hemingway's writings or whatever. Well, those aren't really, well, whatever. A lot of these, one of these like big creative writing books, like Story Genius by Lisa Cron. Like these are simple principles that you could just like write about in a few pages, right? But because the whole purpose of making a book is to sell it, to have enough product to sell, well, they have to like, they have to go in extreme detail, right? They have to go in extreme detail and pad out the book and make it really long. Or in other cases, there's just some authors that like to read their own writing. They like to hear themselves talk. And so so that creates like a barrier to entry if you want to learn about creative writing, right? If you actually want to sit down and read something about it, well, you can either read one of these long ass books or you can go to a blog, right? And we know the kinds of people that write blogs, and they tend to be like blog men, and they have a hard time finding good advice. Honestly, really, like with what I've read so far, I've read 18 significant books on creative writing, and you should really just like read blogs. You should really just read about these books, okay, or just listen to interviews, because they take so long to read, and especially because they use abstract language, right? And when you use a lot of abstract words in a sentence, right, you often won't be able to understand that sentence. You'll have to go over it a few times, because in order to understand a sentence, you have to visualize it. That's how we understand stories, or that's how we understand sentences, is we visualize them, right? And it's very difficult to understand a sentence like, for example, he tried to become a better person. That sentence in isolation, right? Because you have to construct who he is, and then you have to envision you have to envision something for try to become a better person, right? And that involves a lot of scenes and stage work that goes on in your head, because again, you can only imagine an object, right? As Bill Gates tells us, right? And it's just like, that's one problem, right? Is that they're really long. Another is that they're very, very abstract. They use these sentences that are constructed using many, many concept words, right? And so you have to keep going back and rereading over the paragraph, because it didn't quite sink in, right? It's not the same as just like hearing about someone's trip to the store or their camping trip or something, right? Because that's going to be object heavy. That's not going to be abstract, right? And another problem is that honestly, I just lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, here's another problem. Using weird metaphors to describe concepts, right? Because the process of writing, that's a verb, right? A story is a concept. These are concepts that we're working with. But they'll use like objects to make a metaphor, and they'll say weird things like, a story is like an accordion. It's just like, ugh. Books are too long, they're too abstract, they could be the best points could be summarized in a few pages, and Truby's book in particular, he's trying to solve some of the issues with, for example, the 3-act structure, but he just makes them worse because his only way of addressing them is with graphs, right? That was the only part of the book I liked, was in the beginning where he actually started addressing some problems with how people get into creative writing, right? And they pick up, Poetics by Aristotle, and shockingly they don't learn anything from that because it's such an old and it's just not a really helpful book. It was certainly significant in the development of foundations of fiction and foundations of storytelling, right? But just don't bother reading it. Just read about it, okay? Yeah. So he tries to address, he addresses that there are these problems, and that was the only part of the book I liked. And now I'm over halfway through, right? I got to finish the other half. I whittle at it a little bit each day, but it's just like, oh my God. Oh my God. Books on creative writing are awful, and I only recommend, 3 books so far. And I've totally read cover to cover, and it's, the first one's obviously John Gardner's The Art of Fiction, but it's funny because it's that book will steer you in the right direction as a writer and as an artist. I mean, especially the opening, a very inspirational opening. It had a very big impact on me. But it's not going to really help you write a story. There's some things in there that are useful, but not really. And I think there really needs to be a new foundations of fiction. And reading all these books certainly gives me hope that this is something that I could actually do, right? I could actually figure some things out and, maybe try to address some of the core problems of the writing process. Because it's like you can either read a lot, right? And copy, mash together things that you've read in other books, or you have, Stephen King's book, where it's he wastes 3/4 of it, talking about his personal life, right? And look, I get it. It's more of it's a memoir kind of book. He was kind of intending it to be, not just like a list of rules, right? But it's it's one of these books that they're recommending, right? It's one of these, it's one of the popular books to recommend to young authors is, Stephen King's book. And it's you should honestly just not. You should just read the blog post that outlines the top 10 tips, right? The top 10 tips, right? And it's God. Oh my God. But as I was digging through the internet, of course, I came upon Gaedy's Foundations of Physics. And now that I'm convinced that, our experts that talk about, the quantum realm, right? They talk about these action at a distance phenomena, right? They talk about time, they talk about mass, they talk about energy. And yet they can't define their key terms, right? Stephen Hawking writes a book about time. He doesn't define the word time. And it's if those people, couldn't figure out what Gaedy figured out, maybe I could take Gaedy's ideas and apply them to Foundations of Fiction, right? And I think I've started to figure some things out. I've written down a lot of notes so far over the past past 2 years, I think, we don't have a definition of the word story, and we don't have a definition of the word plot. And I noticed a similar thing where we're explaining stories using graphs, right? And we put dots on the graphs, and we say, oh, well, this is when this point happens here. It reminds me so much of when the mathematical physicists, they will try to explain quantum phenomena or the Big Bang or whatever, and they'll draw a picture, and the picture will be retarded. The picture won't make any sense, right? It'll be irrational. And so that's sort of where I'm leaping off from. And honestly, I think that's the only thing possible that could help me completely understand fiction from top to bottom and just sort of be done with all of these books and you know, maybe we could put together a little tiny book that, you know, very, very summarily, is that the word, summarily, emphasizes just like the very basics of fiction, so that you can actually write something coherent that's actually pretty decent, and you know, maybe you know, we won't have to go through 300 pages, 400 pages of like this abstract language. We'll just have like definitions, and we'll have explanations of certain things. Of course, a problem with it would be that it would be very niche, right? It would have a very niche audience because Gaedy's ideas are very niche, and you would have to accept a lot of really radical propositions in order to like understand the book, right? You know, we would have like, because I've already put in there like the definition of the word exist that Gaedy uses. I've also included my own definitions for physics, like I define the word assumption, right? And I also define the word knowledge or belief, which is, those two words are synonyms. So yeah, that's what I'm doing, and that's all I want to say in this video. So thank you.